I'm April Brooks, and this is Tulsa Talks. Students, teachers, support staff, administrators, and parents are all facing a wide variety of competing needs during the global pandemic. Join Kristi, Eaton, and the superintendents of Tulsa and Union Public Schools to learn about all of the factors shaping this unprecedented school year.
My name is Kristi Eaton, and welcome to Tulsa Talks Education. Today, we're bringing you a conversation with local leaders in education. Across the country, school districts have been tasked with coming up with their own approaches regarding COVID-19. We want to cut through the noise to give you access to local leadership. We are discussing with local education leadership different protocols that they are taking regarding COVID-19. In our conversation with education experts, one theme that has come across is the importance of speaking with health officials. We talk a little bit about how the start of the school year will look and what factors went into that decision.
In those early days, we began to look forward and we started to think about the ways that we needed to manage learning through the summer, but then also began to think about the fall. And we knew we needed to prepare to bring our students back fully in person. And we put a lot of energy into that and making sure that all of the hygiene practices that we would need to have in place. So we got hand sanitizing dispensers, hand washing stations, signage for marking stairs, up staircase, down staircase, hallways in buildings, looking at furniture, went through every classroom in the entire district to make sure that it had a working window. We have worked on ventilation in our buildings with an expert on this very topic that we have right here in Tulsa at the University of Tulsa. So we've just done a tremendous amount to make sure that we were prepared to have a safe enough environment to be able to bring people back in person, because that was what we wanted to do. We were also, though, planning for the possibility that we may not be able to bring them back. And when the original CDC recommendations came out in the spring, they said we needed 6 feet of distance between students. So we realized that was not possible with all of our students. So we have this hybrid model where we'd have about half of our students in school at any given time. So we got students organized into those groups, and we're still working through that and getting that ready to go in case we're using it at some point this year. And then we were also thinking about a fully distance learning model, but to be honest with you, that was obviously our last choice, and we were very hopeful that we wouldn't need to be there, and honestly kind of couldn't imagine that we would be. But fortunately, we did put energy into it, and fortunately, the other two models both required energy into distance learning because there's an aspect of it that's required for that. Plus, even when we're back in person this year, at any moment, a family could need to go on distance learning or a school could need to go on distance learning. So we really needed to have that fully ready to go anyway. And unfortunately, the closer we got to the school year, the more our numbers just made it clear, and the advice we were getting from public health professionals and medical experts that we weren't able to bring our students back fully physically in person. So we will start our year in distance learning with the exception of some small focused groups of students. Our buildings are not closed, and there are many, many differences between what children and families will experience this fall compared to what they experienced in the spring.
As I think most people know, that Monday evening our board made the decision that we would start in person on August 24th. And so, that is our charge before us, and that is what we really kind of have been working on. We're spending a lot of time doing the essential things that we need to do in order to prepare for those students that have chosen to be in person. The two options that we offered up our students and our parents were, one, they could choose virtual, or they could choose in person. And the in person, I might say, is in person only if we can continue to do that in a safe manner, and if we have enough staff in order to be able to do that. So we had around 5,200 students choose virtual. And then we also, as part of that surveying, we asked our teachers what would be their preference. And as we expected, those two things did not match up at all, really. And so that's the challenge that we are dealing with. And our administrators at our sites are just amazing leaders. They're doing an incredible job now of trying to reconcile the request really from both entities in terms of what the students are wanting or parents are wanting, and also what the teachers desire to have. That in itself is really quite a laborious process in reconciling what both of them are wanting and then what we can actually offer. But, I think it's like everything with what we're dealing with COVID. We're going to be positive about this, and it doesn't matter the format that our students are in, whether they're in virtual or whether, hopefully we can still do it in person here, and that's what the board wants us to do. We're going to support them, and we're going to be there for them and provide them with this dynamic and amazing learning experience that we've always tried to do at Union Public Schools.
I know the board, you had one proposal and the board, as you mentioned, selected a different proposal. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you're doing now with this other proposal moving forward? In a couple weeks, kids will be coming back on campus. What precautions will be in place, how you're going to actually do day-to-day learning?
My recommendation was really kind of based on the science and the data and what the Tulsa Health Department was suggesting to us, that they did not feel like it was time for us right now to be back in person in terms of our COVID numbers within Tulsa County and also within the Union District. And, this was a tough decision. Let me just say this all the way around for everyone. I think we all have to understand that there was no probably right decision or easy decision to make here. But now that the decision has been made, what we are doing is making sure that all of our sites have the right sanitizing equipment and cleaning equipment that's required. We've got to have the right PPE in place and the right cleaning agents and hand sanitizing things in order for us to have school. But my operations team, they're amazing. They said, yes, we will have it, and we will be ready to go. The other thing we're doing is, also doing some things with our climates in the buildings. We're bringing in much more increased outside air. So, it's August and it's hot in Oklahoma, as we know. Our buildings are not going to be as cool as perhaps we're used to them being, because we need to circulate in. According to the CDC, it's one of those protocols and practices to put into place, is to bring in much more outside air. And we'll crank up that percent as much as we can until we get to the point where we realize, okay, we've got to, try to keep it cool enough for people to be comfortable in the sites. Our buses will have the windows down, again, in order to circulate more air within the buses. And as you know, Union was one of the first organizations within the Tulsa County to say that if we're going to attempt to have school, everyone will have to wear a mask. And, in terms of the transmission of this disease, the science is telling us that that can be as effective as 85%. And so our board courageously made that decision back in July to say, yes, everyone must wear a mask, from our students to our faculty. So that will be a requirement. We just will not let students in unless they have a mask on. Of course, we're also going to be sensitive to those medical issues that a student might have that would permit them not to have to wear a mask at all times. But for the most part, they'll be masked up.
For one thing, I think it's important for people to remember that our teachers and students left for spring break and had no idea they were not coming back. And so, children had things in their lockers, they had projects in their classrooms, teachers didn't have their materials. We don't take all of our materials home. I'm sure they had a few things to work on, that's how they are. But for the most part, everything was at school waiting for us to come back from spring break. And when the state made the decision to extend spring break and then ultimately to close, to end the school year in person, our buildings were closed. We actually were not allowed by that decision to have people in our buildings. And so, teachers and students. And so while we were able to, in some cases, arrange for a custodian to go and grab something from a room and stuff like that, it was, to say that it wasn't planned is just, the understatement of the century. It was a crisis moment. It was a situation where our teachers just rallied like they do and did their best, and the district did too, to support them, to provide content and learning experiences and materials for children to do. But now, because we've been working on distance learning, we have quality online materials that are aligned to our standards and to the pacing that we have in our district, made sure that those are quality and accessible. We have a process that we heard from families how difficult it was to manage all these different systems. So we have this way for students to just sign on in one place. And in fact, they can just wave a badge. And especially when they're little and, they have to type their whole email address and stuff, it signs them in right away, and they have immediate access to all of what they need to get their learning plan for that day and to be a part of their class conversations and lessons and meetings and things like that. There are a lot of other differences too. We are taking attendance, grades count. It's a full day of learning. So there are a number of things that are going to be really different. With that said, of course, it doesn't take away from the magnitude of what this means for families and what a burden and a challenge that this places on families who are trying to keep their own jobs and professions going and take care of their children at the same time. I've also seen families who are, organizing themselves in, some people are calling them pods or buds, bubbles, where they are getting together with friends from church or people in the neighborhood or even cousins and family members to say, okay, we're going to make an agreement that our families are going to be safe in the rest of our lives, and sort of blend families so that the adults can take turns and everyone doesn't have to have the same impact on their day-to-day work as it would if they were only with their own children and parent or parents.
Anything else you would like to share with families, students, personnel, teachers? Just an opportunity to share your thoughts.
So we made sure that we are getting our advice from our public health officials and from medical experts. So we've surrounded ourselves with some local professionals, and we meet with them, and they are helping us to answer questions and to understand the latest research. And because this is a novel coronavirus, because it's new, there's so many things that the scientists and other medical experts are learning about this virus and about the disease itself. And so they're keeping us up to date because they're reading the most recent peer-reviewed articles and studies about this virus. So the more we're staying up to date on that so that we know the most recent information. And we're basing our decisions on facts, on data, on science. And I'll just give you one data point that I don't think a lot of people even pay as much attention to, and that is the positivity rate, meaning of all the people who are tested, what percentage of them test positive. And just to give a little bit of a comparison, in New York right now, because their rates have really gone down, they're hoping to be back in person. And at the state level, they've said that if their positivity rate is 5%, then they would be able to be back in person. And at the local level, New York City, they've said 3%. So 3 to 5% positivity rate, they believe that would be a safe range to be able to be back in person. The last time I looked at our positivity rate here, it was more than 20%. So just to give a sense of kind of where we are as a community, that's the type of data that we had available to us that said that it was not safe right now for us to be back. And while we know that children are not tending to get as ill with this virus, which is wonderful, adults do. And we have 6,000 adults in our system. And I tell people all the time that whether you're 4 or 14 in our system as children, we have an obligation to keep you safe. But if you're 4, 14, or 40, you are still someone's baby. And I have a commitment and an obligation to our team members to keep them safe as well. We also know that many of our children are living in extended families and with grandparents. And so there are lots and lots of reasons why we need to keep our whole team safe. But it's also a commitment that we have to the broader community, because we have an obligation to each other to get this virus under control. It doesn't control us, we can control it. And while we can't, completely obliterate it right now until we fully have a vaccine and learn more and more about it, right now we have the ability through masks to be able to mimic what a vaccine could do. And if everyone would wear their mask, or as Dr. Dart says, watch your distance, wear your mask, wash your hands. If we would just do that, every single one of us, we could, within just a few weeks, get this completely under control. And that would mean that we would be able to be back in person that second quarter. And it would also mean just amazing things for our local economy. And, I love Tulsa so much, and I love our small businesses, our restaurants and shops, and small businesses that serve them and beyond, and the big corporations that are here, and all of those companies, and everyone's livelihood, and the way our city thrives is reliant upon us just doing the few things that we know will make a difference, and the few things that really are not anything that is asking more of us than we should be willing to do.
We miss our students and our staff greatly. We're ready to have them back. I cannot tell you how much we love our almost 16,000 students in Union. We love our kiddos because Union really is America in terms of our diversity. Our diversity at Union, we consider a precious treasure. And we know that anytime you're in a distance learning format, that is not ideal. We get that. But we're still going to make sure that it's a viable experience. And those who chose virtual, our staff have been working really hard, or they've been working, they started working about May and June on really recalibrating our virtual learning and our distance learning format in case we were to have to go to this. So I really believe that it's going to be a viable learning experience. It's going to be much more robust, much more like it would be if they were in a regular classroom moving forward. But, we miss them. And man, if I could just snap my fingers and say we are back and we're ready to have them back. They're our shining moment when we get them back and we see the life in our buildings with our kids and our parents. Our teachers and the support of our parents all working together. It's a beautiful thing. And I know I speak for our teachers that we are so ready. We are so ready to get them back. And I said to our elementary principals yesterday, all right, when it's time for, bringing the students back on August 24th, you have to promise me that you're going to give them hugs, but they've got to be virtual hugs. You cannot be physically hugging them, because we know that's just what our elementary principals and our teachers do, is that they love on those kids, and that's what we want them to do. So we're going to get through this. This is a storm. I used this example with all of our administrators yesterday in a meeting that, this is a storm, and it's one of those storms that's lasting much longer than we would like it to. But we also know behind every storm is a silver and a shining cloud and the sunshine, and we'll get there. But we've got to be together on this. That's the only way we're going to get through this, is try not to let the political divisiveness that's existing, and that's most disappointing to me. We cannot let that interfere with the human spirit in knowing what we have to do for not only our students, but also for the people whom we share our community and lives with.
Thank you to Kristi Eaton and to all of our guests, and thank you for watching. I hope you'll join me again for the next episode of Tulsa Talks.